Welcome to the Groove Pod, where two cousins and lovers of music explore their journeys through audio and listening to music, and specifically explore whether or not it's worth going down the path of vinyl in this digital age. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's kick off with some introductions of us, I guess, should we?
That sounds good.
Do you want to just give us a quick, like the 30-second grab of who you are and why you're here?
Hello, Lachlan. Hello, the internet. I'm Nic Fillingham. I'm Lachlan's cousin, Lachlan's younger cousin. I live in Seattle, Washington, but by my accent, hopefully people can hear that I am Australian. I'm still Australian, as well as living over in the US, and I am passionate about music, and I would say I have a passion for sound. And over the years, I have often come to you, Lach, for advice on all things life-related, but specifically around music and audio and speakers and things that amplify and go boom. And you have been gracious enough to say yes to doing a podcast with me where we get to talk about this stuff. Does that explain who I am?
I think it does for now, right. and people get to know us as we go on. I'll introduce me too, because some people will know me from the Passion for Sound YouTube channel. Others will not know me. So my name's Lachlan. I'm an audio enthusiast and music lover first and foremost. Both Nic and I play musical instruments, although Nic still does, and I've kind of drifted away from that in recent years, but I'm planning to come back around. So I've been into audio forever and started reviewing audio gear on HeadFi years ago just as an amateur. And actually, although before that I was doing professional reviewing work for in-car audio at one stage, writing for magazines.
The magazine, right?
Yeah, I think it was In-Car Entertainment I used to write for.
Yeah.
But then in the last 5 or 6 years, started up the YouTube channel, which is now the main focus. So yeah, very much into audio, very much into music, and just, love trying to find that without chasing it through the gear. I love trying to find those moments of connection with the music where you hear something and it brings up the goosebumps and you feel that buzz that the music can give us. So that's kind of who I am and where I'm coming from. And I think the other thing we want to talk about today, or to get started with today, was why this podcast came around to exist. Obviously, it was a conversation we had, Nic, over Christmas that kind of got us started. But do you want to share the impetus from your point of view of why this has come to exist?
So yeah, we were catching up over Christmas in person for the first time in a very long time.
Forever, yeah.
It was a great catch up. And I sort of mentioned to you that I have, entered my 40s and have started to turn into the middle-aged vinyl douchebag, but very much wanting to avoid that sort of trope and trying to not be the stereotypical vinyl douchebag. I don't know if is there another, in your experience, how else are the middle-aged vinyl DBs referred to? Is there some
I don't
more
actually
pithy than
know.
that?
I don't know.
Anyway. And so I was saying to you that I'm sort of at the very sort of beginning of that journey. I got a turntable a couple of years ago, and someone gave me a record as a gift, and I didn't have a turntable. So I was like, I'll get a turntable. I'll get a relatively inexpensive one, but I'll get one that might be sort of semi-upgradable at some point if I want to get more into it. And for a long time, I had one turntable. I think I had 2 records. And then, I can't even remember, but I sort of got to a point. Oh, I do remember. My fiance, Sally, she is a massive fan of Joni Mitchell. And it was her birthday, and Joni had recently left Spotify for various reasons that folks can look up if they're interested into what happened. And so you couldn't listen to her, right? She wasn't on any sort of streaming platform. And I, at the time, thought, I'm going to buy Sally a Joni Mitchell vinyl record. Really not necessarily to listen to, maybe to listen to in a sort of a one-off sort of special sense, but more just sort of as a gift. And then I contacted my friend John, and John put me in contact with his friend Carl, and Carl is a vinyl head, has never not been a vinyl head, and he introduced me to Discogs, and from there I sort of got this little taste of this world that's out there, and then also started to listen to these few vinyl records that I had and thought actually this is kind of cool. I don't know if the actual sort of technical fidelity is better, worse, or whatever compared to CDs, compared to streaming, compared to some lossless FLAC files, whatever. But I really enjoyed it. And that's, fast forward to, or back up now to sort of to Christmas. And so I wanted to say, well, the first thing I said is, Lach, are you into vinyl? And you'd said, no, but I'm actually about, I don't know if I can say this, but
yes,
you were about to formally review your first piece of vinyl equipment.
Yeah.
And I said, we could do a podcast where we sort of come together and go down this rabbit hole together. And your ears pricked up.
Yeah, totally. And if I can jump in and add some stuff here, so what I've got to review is the FIO TT13. Yes, TT13. So FIO, for those not familiar, it's a Chinese brand that have been making. In fact, they made one of the very first portable headphone amplifiers that ever got me into the headphone hobby and the headphone world. So that's got to be going back 15 years or so at least, probably more. And I had sworn that I was never going to do turntables. Not just, and I don't just mean as a review thing. I'd sworn I was never going to own a turntable because I didn't want to go. Well, I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole. Like, I already know enough rabbit holes in the world I'm in where, your choice of DAC, your choice of power supply, your choice of cable, your choice of headphone amp, all these things can influence the sound. So it's all stuff you have to think about. And then the idea of adding a turntable, and then you've got to think about which style of turntable and which cartridge type do you use, and do you want to upgrade the cartridge? Like, there was another world I didn't want to venture into. But FIO reached out and said, we've got this really nice little entry-level cheap turntable that anybody can just buy and go. And I was like, oh, yeah, all right, I'll review it. And my aim is that I review it and that's it. But I'm terrified to think that it might not be it. And there's a part of me. So I've got a little one called, his name's Xander. He's 4.5, and there's a little part of me that if we had a space in the house,
human, not a turntable, by the way.
Yes, right? So thank you for adding that. There's a part of me that remembers the joy as a kid of being able to go to dad's and mum's, I guess, record collection. I think dad was probably more into it, but I think they both had records. Being able to go to their record collection and experience that, almost that ritual of choosing the album, opening it up, cleaning it down, putting it on, and then enjoying the music. And there is a part of me that without necessarily wanting to get into the rabbit hole of which cartridge and what drive type and all of the fiddling stuff, just the experience potentially of giving Xander access to some records and a record player, I don't know if it added to my love of music and if it would have been different had it been CDs or streaming. And I think that brings me back to something I wanted to ask you, Nick. When you got into vinyl, was it the sound that you were preferring, or was it the process that enhanced the listening experience, do you think?
Yes. So I'll stress again, still very new into vinyl. I don't want people listening to this thinking like, this other fellow with the Australian accent is a vinyl expert. I'm not, although I have started to sort of cram. But I would say it's a few things. I was immediately drawn to, yes, the ritual. There's something like, I would say to Sally, my fiance, it's like, I'm going to put a record on. And the act of going and putting a record on is there is sort of a ritualistic quality, a very small, but it's, when you say like, oh, I'm going to stream an album on Spotify, there's no romance there, right? Like, no. That's just like, okay, fine, whatever.
You take out your phone, which you use for every other thing in your life, and you click some buttons
right.
and it goes.
Or you just yell at your, Alexa or Siri or something to play something for you. But like, hey, I'm going to put a record on. Like, wow, that there's immediately everything sort of changes just a tiny bit. So there was that part of it. The other thing that I realized, which again, it sounds really silly to say it out now, but it very much sort of came as a revelation, was like, oh, wow, when these records were being created, when the artists were creating them, the musicians, but also the producers, the mastering, the mixing, all of the engineering, all the way through to the actual sort of pressing of the chunks of vinyl, there was a lot of intention in that. Like, there was a lot of, okay, you have a limited amount of space on each side, a limited amount of space entirely on a vinyl for the number of minutes worth of audio that you could have, and then, the silence you wanted between tracks, if any. Apparently, if you want more bass in the mix, then the grooves have to be, I don't know, they're deeper or wider apart. These are questions I'm going to be asking you along this journey. And that affects
the treble. So they have to balance things like, if I do this with the bass, it's going to do this to the treble. So what's the balance? Absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing that I was like, we pick up our phone and we start streaming something, or even a CD. We just go to the track that we want, or even if we want the whole album, we just sort of hit play and walk away. But when you have to me at least, this observation was, oh wow, the artists in the entire process of creating this record, they put, for the majority of them, put a lot of thought and time and love and creativity into this. And so listening to a side of a record from the outer groove all the way into the middle is an experience. And I immediately sort of, I'll say, re-identified that, sort of understood that, and went, oh wow, I want to experience that. And then the other thing I realized was like, oh my gosh, like this was the highest fidelity medium for a long time. And so there's probably a lot of music out there. In fact, the majority of music up until maybe the mid 80s or even late 80s was recorded, mixed, mastered for vinyl. And so it's quite possible that when you listen to a vinyl record, assuming you're listening on a relatively, good system, you're going to be experiencing that piece of art, that piece of music, in the way that the artists and the engineers and the producers and everyone involved intended it to be. And I was like, oh, wow, I never really put that together. Like, I love Led Zeppelin, but I just have my own playlist of Led Zeppelin on Spotify, which I put on random, when I want to listen to Led Zeppelin. I've never actually intentionally, or maybe I have once or twice, but I've never really with true intention sat down and listened side A, track one, to that sort of experience. And so that was like, ooh, that's really interesting. There's a third thing, but I'm going to stop talking for a sec because it looked like you might have had a question.
I've actually got three things I wanted to mention. So the first thing was Led Zeppelin is a really interesting case. I was listening to a great episode of the Darko Audio podcast the other day. So John Darko is a long-time audio reviewer. He was interviewing Peter Como, who's been a speaker designer for many, many years in the industry. He's also been a journalist. He's also been a retailer, massive amounts of knowledge. And Peter shared a story about the Led Zeppelin 4 album. If you listen to that album on the vinyl, which I haven't tried this yet, I'm excited to try it at some stage, the mix and the master for the Led Zeppelin 4 LP, he said, is so much better than the streamed version. And specifically, this comes back to that whole thing about the mix of the bass and the treble and everything. He said what's the name of the
John
drummer?
Bonham.
It is John Bonham. I was going to say John Bonham. Anyway, John Bonham, drummer of Led Zeppelin.
Edit it back in so it sounds like you know what you're talking about.
That's right, exactly. He's human. So when John Bonham's drums come in Led Zeppelin 4 album, he said they sound like thunder on the LP. But when you listen to it on the stream, they're a bit clinical. They're a little bit kind of lacking in that intensity. So I'm excited. And I don't know if you've got Led Zeppelin 4 on vinyl, but that's one you might want to go try and compare the stream compared to the vinyl, and you can let us know at next episode. So that was one thing I wanted to say. Another thing I wanted to say was that for those who are listening to this and I say this with affection, who are audio nerds, because I would consider myself an audio nerd, so I don't say that in any way derogatory. But for those who are audio nerds, when we're talking about records being at one stage the highest fidelity version of the music, obviously that's not including reel-to-reel tape, because that was not consumer. Yep. We get that there was probably better out there, but in terms of consumer audio, yes, it was vinyl. And then the final thing I wanted to say was I wanted to bring up the counterpoint and for those who are listening to this going, I'm not sure if I want to listen to a vinyl-focused podcast, one of the things that you and I spoke about, Nick, as we got this going, was that I'm in this position of going, I don't know if I want to go down the path of vinyl. And so I'm hearing you talk about all this stuff, and in the back of my head, I'm going, yes, I get it, but is it worth it? Yes, I get it, but is it worth it? And I've had an interesting experience at hi-fi shows where I've gone into the hi-fi show room, and this was in a room of a guy who I know well and I respect, and he makes amazing speakers and preamps and amps. And I chatted to him afterwards, and I just sort of quietly said to him, hey, you might want to go back to your digital source, I think, because I don't think the record's doing you any favors. Because I'd heard his speakers before and I knew how good the speakers could sound. And I think in the time I was in the room, he went from digital to vinyl or something, and it wasn't a track-for-track comparison, but the crispness and the clarity that brought some energy to the sound, kind of disappeared with the vinyl. And so that's something I'm also looking to explore, is where, and is it a record to record thing, or is it a format to format thing? Like is digital audio, assuming it's done well, always going to do that better, or is it just purely about the mix and the master? I don't know that yet. But for those of you that are more just about the audio and less about the vinyl, I think it's probably interesting for you to know, or good for you to know, that we are going to cover the joys of audio and listening and discovering music in general. It's not just about vinyl, but vinyl's going to obviously weave in and out through it as we go. That was kind of the three things that had popped into my mind. Coming back over to you, Nick, I think you had a third thing you were going to say about the vinyl experience.
I did, and that's a great segue. Is that, and I think the third thing that I said to you at Christmas time was like, but I don't want to get to the point where I have 20,000 vinyl records and I listen to none of them, or I only listen to like 5 or 6. I mean, I don't feel like there's sort of a Pokemon quality to it where it's, less, more is more. And so the thing I said is like, I'm wondering, as almost an artistic, I'll say like an artistic thought experiment or something, could I create a limit for the number of vinyl records that I want to have in my collection? Because I don't want to own a vinyl record that I don't listen to. To me, if I'm going to buy a vinyl record, there has to be a reason for it. There has to be a reason to own the vinyl medium over the higher fidelity, the newer, more modern, the better quality, whether it's digital or whatever. And so that's one of the things. And I thought, oh my gosh, Lachlan can help in some, in many ways in me with sort of this question here. So like, Fleetwood Mac rumors, is the surround sound lossless, FLAC audio going to be the superior experience? Or should I go and get a 1972, I can't remember what year it came out, but like 19 something original Carlton pressing, and go and have it sonically cleaned and so the question is sort of like, okay, I have music I already love. I'm always exploring new music. The question I'm now adding on top of that is like, well, should I own and listen to this music and experience this music on vinyl, given all the limitations and given, everything that comes with that? Or is the reality that like, no, if you love this music, the best way to experience it is on CD or through high fidelity streaming? And so that's a big part of what I wanted to explore with you on this podcast is like, okay, should I get this album? Should I get this song? Should I get this experience on vinyl? Is it worth it? Do you get more out of it? Or is it just sort of silly? And you, with all of your experience and your professional and technical training, I thought would be the person to really help me answer that question. And also, I don't want to be having to mortgage my house to go and buy vinyl too. So like, I want to keep my collection small, and I want it to be the music that I love, and I want it to be music to listen to. There's only so many hours in the day. So can I almost artificially constrain the number of vinyl records that I own because it's music that is better on vinyl, or at least has something to offer on vinyl. It's music that I love, and I'm going to have the time to listen to it. And so that's the three things that I'm sort of like very interested in pursuing. Oh, and there's a fourth. The fourth is I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing from an equipment perspective, and I want to make sure that I am listening to it in the best possible way. I've got the best possible equipment, and I'm not spending money where I don't need to because I really can't get extra. I can't hear whatever the benefit might be out of this piece of equipment over that.
And that's a real challenge when people are getting into the hobby, particularly I think I guess it's with speakers too. But I see more of it in the headphone space because a lot of time people they've had speakers their whole life, and they've just, if they've gotten into audio and they've chosen to upgrade, they've gradually upgraded their system. So it's not a brand new thing. But I think a lot of people that get into headphone listening, which I think you mentioned you want to be able to set it up so you can sit with headphones sometimes, it's really challenging. I think particularly there's so many cheap Chinese products, some of which are fantastic. So I don't say cheap in a bad way. I say cheap in the sense that there's lots of them on the market, and they're all relatively affordable when we're talking hi-fi dollars, because obviously in hi-fi dollars it goes up to tens of thousands very easily. There's so much stuff on the market that looks like a good deal but is not actually going to bring you enjoyment in the music. It's going to reproduce the music, it's probably going to measure well, so it looks on paper, you go, oh, that's got distortion of 0.00000000002%. It must be good. And then you plug it in and you go, oh, I'm not enjoying my music. And that to me defeats the purpose. So that's, I think that's another part of it. And obviously there's the choice of turntable and upgrades to your turntable, but that's still got to feed into a phono preamp. It's then got to feed into a headphone amp or a power amp or a separate preamp, whatever you need to do to set up your particular system. And each of those pieces is a part of that end enjoyment you get. So you could get a wonderful turntable and have it sound meh at the other end if something's stolen the life out of it. So that's a challenge. I wanted to mention, it's funny, you talked about Led Zeppelin before, and then there was that Led Zeppelin 4 example. Rumours is fascinating as an example in this discussion too. I don't know if Spotify's the same because I don't use Spotify, but it might be Tidal and Qobuz, which are two other streaming platforms. They're the sort of the lossless CD quality and above platforms. I generally use Qobuz because I think it sounds just a little bit better, even though that kind of doesn't make sense because it is all just digital files, but that's a whole nother topic. If you go onto one or both of those, and I can't recall if it's both, and you search for Rumours, there are about 4 different versions of Rumours on those streaming platforms. If you listen to them one at a time, like choose your favorite track and listen to that same track across the 4 masters, everyone sounds different. And some of them sound dreadful, like so lean, clinical, and lifeless. And so, as you said, Rumours, I'm like, yes, that's probably a great example because I remember listening to Rumours on vinyl as a kid. And I remember, like, Don't Stop being a great example. It has a rhythm and a drive to it that I remembered as a kid. And then I went and put it on streaming, and I was like, this isn't doing it for me like it used to. Maybe I've changed, or maybe there was something different in my system now that wasn't allowing it to be at its best.
No, it is the children who are wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What you just
Simpsons
said to me.
Quote.
What you just said to me then, though, I'm like, maybe the difference is not me or the gear. Maybe it's that I'm now listening to it and it's the streamed version, the digital masters, rather than that original vinyl master. And however they had to manipulate the sound to get it to fit on the record and to optimize it for the record, that might have been where the magic was. So,
totally. And then, a question I would love answered is, maybe you do know the answer, but there's 4 versions on Tidal, or what's the French one called? Sorry,
Qobuz.
Qobuz. There you go.
Qobuz.
Folks listening will realize I have. This is how new I am to your world if I don't even know how to pronounce the second one. But like, okay, if there's 4 versions on Tidal, why is there 4 versions, and how did the 4 versions come to be? Is that because Tidal went and bought the SACD and did their own rip on someone's computer, or did they get the digital master? Did they get the analog master? Like, how do those encoded editions come to be? What's the process? What's the step? I don't really need to know that, but they're certainly the questions that I sort of ask. Like, I'm the same. When I listen to something that is older music that I know has been digitized at some point, or even sort of newer stuff. But normally what I'm asking is, how did this actual digital file come to be? How many times did it get converted? Like, was it ripped to some sort of, lossless wave, and then from there it was encoded into all the various, sort of downstream versions? We don't have to answer these questions, but like you, I often wonder, is it that, or is it back to that original medium? Like, no, this music was recorded, mastered, mixed, pressed for vinyl, and the experience you could create on vinyl for whatever reason is different, and that difference is either difficult to, or if not, or impossible to recreate in the digital sense. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just sort of, these are some of the questions that I ask myself too when I listen to these things and hear differences.
No, it's a good question, and I'm guessing you could dig into it and find the answers to these, but I don't know the answers as to how some of these versions come about. I mean, there's always been, at least for as long as digital's been around, there's always been remasters pop up. Like, every time I go to find a new album, there's often a deluxe version and a remastered version and an anniversary remaster version with bonus live tracks and stuff like that. I think that's always existed, but I wonder with examples like Rumours, I'm just scrolling through Qobuz. Oh, that's weird. Rumours is not on Qobuz. How does that happen? That's so
You got to
weird.
use the French spelling.
Maybe a rumor. Let me try title. The Fleetwood Mac self-titled album. There's 2 versions on Cobus, I should say, but I'm not sure with rumors. But to answer the question, I don't know if these versions are created because of digital or if it would have happened if we lived in a purely vinyl world. Here we go. I've got it now. So Fleetwood Mac rumors. There's the regular album. There's then the Super Deluxe album, which looks to not be remastered. There's the Deluxe edition. And then there's another copy of the original 1977 version. So it's very, very strange. I don't know what the story is and why they do this. But the thing I don't like is it also makes it very confusing for people when they get on here. And it's very easy to go on there and play an album and go, oh, this sounds like rubbish. I don't want to listen to that anymore. But it may not be that the album's rubbish. It may be that the remix or the master is rubbish. And I think that's where it gets really tricky for people. And where this is going in relation to the vinyl conversation is, having now gone to buy albums, Nick, have you experienced that in the vinyl world? Do you find that there are multiple versions of the albums on vinyl? Is it just as bad or worse?
Okay. Again, I am a novice here. Maybe I'm a smidge up from novice. My record collection now is I've got about 60 or 70, and that's not a lot, right? But I am also quite intentional in when I go and buy, and we'll talk more about that as this podcast progresses. But one thing I have noticed and one thing I have realized is that there are so many different pressings. So you think about mixing and then mastering. And then, in the digital sense, once you have that digital master, I think this is correct in saying, now you're just copying those files onto whether it's a CD or whether it's making them available for download or stream. But essentially, it's the same digital source. It might get encoded for something that has a higher or lower bit rate, depending on what you're trying to do. But essentially, it's the same digital source. What I'm learning, and if I'm wrong, I would love for, I don't know how we're going to encourage people to tell us that we have no idea what we're talking about. But yeah, contact me to tell me where I'm wrong. But yeah, so there are different pressings. So back in the days before, truly massive sort of global supply chains and distribution, I think what happened was that, there would be different vinyl record pressing plants around the world, and in some cases just around the country. Like, America had many, many different vinyl pressing companies, and depending on where the distribution rights lay and many other factors, you would get different pressings of the same record. And then so now what comes into it is the quality of the pressing. And so how high quality was the vinyl, the actual material, that black goo or whatever color it was that the actual grooves get stamped into. And so what you see when you go on to Discogs and you start to sort of dig into a particular album that had many, 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 many pressings, is you'll see some have great ratings for the individual pressing, because it's clear that the factory that was pressing that album used high quality equipment and high quality vinyl and blah 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 blah. And then you'll see there are crap ones, like this was pressed with recycled vinyl, or there was hair in it. I mean, I'm making all that up, right? But now you have not just a difference in mixing and mastering, you actually now have a difference in the individual pressings based on perhaps the year, perhaps the country, perhaps the factory. And I have not dived into that yet, other than when I've looked at a particular album that I'm interested in, I will look and see, do any of these pressings seem to have a significantly higher or lower review than others, just to see if there's something to avoid. But I cannot, sitting here right now, I can't tell you the Philadelphia Carrollton pressing is always the best. Like, I have no idea. I made that up too. That might even be a real thing. But yes, unfortunately, you now have an additional vector in vinyl, which is the pressing itself, and when and where and who and how, and was Mercury in retrograde, all that kind of stuff.
That's incredible. That's a whole another crazy layer of complication there. That's interesting, because I was just thinking at one stage there was a move in that direction with CDs, where you could get special versions of CDs, like some of the Japanese production CDs, and like they were done with a gold reflective layer instead of a silver reflective layer, but that never went to the same degree as obviously what's happened with vinyl.
Those were higher quality bits.
Well, the funny thing is that
Premium bits.
it does make a difference. I don't know how, but
What?
it
No,
does.
it doesn't.
It does. Digital's a
How?
fascinating world. I'm guessing it's to do with jitter, which is your timing accuracy and how precisely the laser can read the data in time without having to revisit it or something. I don't know. That's a realm of voodoo and black magic that I haven't dived into.
I call hogwash on that.
Well, you'd be fascinated with the world of digital then, because even some people are going to get really cranky about this, so maybe we don't want people to be able to comment.
No, let's do it. I like controversy.
The application that you use on your computer to play back the music can change the sound of the music.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
And yet both of them can be doing bit perfect output. So obviously, if you're using Windows, for instance, I'm not a Mac user, so I can't comment on that, but I know in Windows, if you send the audio through the Windows operating system, it will screw up the sound quality because it resamples it all. But even if you take
it can resample.
Yes. If we use, say, I've got Rune is my main playback software because it's convenient and easy. I also use JRiver for its library management side of things and sometimes playback. If I listen to JRiver and I listen to Rune, exactly the same file, going to exactly the same device, using exactly the same drivers and settings, and all bypassing the Windows operating system, the playback sounds different. I don't necessarily know that I'd say one sounds better or worse, but it sounds different. And so this is where digital is a weird thing because it is all ones and zeros. But my understanding to date is that it's all about how noise is generated or not generated and then handled within the system. So my understanding is if one app is doing a more efficient job of extracting the audio signal and sending it out, it's going to create less noise within the computer, and that noise is going to create less timing issues in the stream going out, or it may send less noise out through the USB socket that ends up getting into your DAC. So all that stuff seems to be what's going on. But to bring all this back to where we started, it's really interesting that every single version of an audio format, whether it's reel-to-reel, cassette, vinyl, CD, or now streaming / local digital file playback from a hard drive or a network attached storage, they all have nuances. They all have things that when you actually lift anywhere past the surface, you go, if I really want to experience this at its best, I have to think about this. And then we just have to work out how deep down that rabbit hole are we going to go in any particular format. So it's fascinating. I had no idea about the pressings thing.
I didn't either. I come back to, the sort of impetus here for me sort of getting into vinyl, where I wanted to get this Joni Mitchell Blue album for my fiancée Sally. And my friend Carl, he specifically sort of sent me a link. He goes, this is the one to get. And he sent me the link and I opened up the link. And I then accidentally, it was a link to Discogs for that very specific pressing of that album. And I must have accidentally clicked show all versions or something like that. And all of a sudden there's, 20, 30, 40 different pressings of that album. And I'm like, hang on, what? Is this 20, 30? Is this just 20, 30 different entries of people selling the album? And then I was like, hang on, no, they all have different little catalog codes and some of the actual album art's different. And I was like, oh, okay, this is obviously, you buy it in Japan, and maybe they have Joni Mitchell in English, but maybe Blue has been localized into the Japanese language, or maybe they're just different artwork. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But then I was like, well, hang on, no, it seems to be more than just that. And this is where I was like, oh my gosh, there are, vinyl is a correct to say it's an analog medium? It's an analog medium, right?
Absolutely.
It's certainly not digital.
No.
And so that also means that it's subject to climate. So, vinyl can crack and warp. Vinyl warps very, very easily. In fact, one of the first albums that I bought on vinyl after I got the Joni Mitchell one was Brothers in Arms. And I just got a $5 version at a record store. I hadn't gone through the whole Discogs. Let's get a great pressing. I just bought it. It was $5. I was like, I love this album. Let's listen to that on vinyl. Let's try that experience. And I say accidentally now. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. But once I finished playing it, I just left it in the record player. I put the lid down and I walked away. and it was a particularly sunny day. And the next day I came back and the sun had obviously come through the window, hit the perspex or the plexiglass of the record player case. Some sort of lensing refractive thing happened and it heated up the record, and the record bubbled and warped.
Wow.
And I was like, oh shit. And like, that's it. It's dead. Like it's gone.
No recovery.
It's dead. There's nothing, you can't do anything there. And so, that's the other thing you've got to think about is like, well, where was it pressed and where was it stored and how was it moved and what sort of other sort of environmental factors have played, a part in the life and creation of this piece of medium. So,
and that's another thing then, and we probably should wrap this episode up, but
please,
we could keep talking forever, but we probably should mention before we wrap it up that that's another thing to think about with vinyl is caring for vinyl is an extra, we're not talking, it's not quite like a pet, but we're getting towards it where it's not low maintenance. I mean, CDs were lower maintenance. You still have to be careful about not scratching them or anything like that. But whilst on one hand, the ritual
I want to jump
great,
in for a sec, Locke. Have you noticed CDs that you bought maybe in the 90s or, even like some of your older CDs, have you started to see some that have started to essentially fall apart? Like the actual disc itself, the plastic has separated from the metallic coating where the date, like I've actually got some audio CDs that have rotted.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I would never have thought that was possible, but like CDs are obviously not an archival medium. They're plastic and a little thin layer of metal. And some of my first CDs I got from the 90s are destroyed.
Yeah, I had a few and there was something that I realized had caused it with mine, but I had 2 or 3 that I just had to chuck away. There was nothing I could do. And it looked a bit like it looked like it rotted. The silver layer had rotted away, but I'm guessing it's something else because it's not biological material. But yes, I've found that, and I'm guessing part of it is also how we store them. And I never thought about how I stored my CDs. I used to do DJing, so I had folders upon folders, those 200 folder or 200 disc folders. I've got 12, 14 of those that were up in a cupboard, and they're now out in the garage inside a sealed plastic box. But they're probably, now that I think about it, they're probably dying out there because that garage would have massive fluctuations in temperature. Thankfully, I've got all those CDs stored on hard drives now, and almost all of them I've got access to through streaming services. So if the worst comes worst, I can still get to that music. But yeah, it's something I have noticed is that CDs are not forever. And even digital files, I've had files that seemingly were securely stored on my hard drives just randomly get corrupted. So yeah, I think it's like we said before, every audio format has its nuances and its things to think about and watch out for, but and also every audio format has its risks and its concerns. But I think as you go more towards digital, those concerns reduce, particularly with the streaming world today, where it's not our problem to worry about the storage and maintenance of them. So yeah, so there's many layers of this to unpack is what I'm seeing, and many more episodes for us to talk about.
And that's not even covering the fact that we're hopefully going to share with each other
some
new
music.
And not so new music that we've discovered that we want to share with each other.
Absolutely.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to have to go out very soon, maybe even today. I mean soon in the case of weeks, but I might do it today. I need to go out and buy a couple of albums to test on this turntable. And I was thinking about what albums we're going to get, and I thought, well, that could actually be a good conversation to bring back to you, which is, here's what I bought. Have you heard these artists? Because there'd be a couple of those that I'm really, really fans of, and I know that they've got good music at a recording level. So we'll talk about that in the next episode. Another thing I want to park for next episode is an amazing nugget that I learned about Joni Mitchell that you might want to share with Sally. You guys might already know it. And I won't talk about it now because it's going to open up a whole nother conversation, which is fascinating.
She could move things with her mind.
Close. No, not that.
Oh, sorry. You're going.
But she did some very unorthodox things, which is what makes her music what it is, but it also made it very difficult for her to find studio musicians. That not in the sense that they didn't want to be studio musicians, but they weren't effective studio musicians with her because of how she did things. So I'm going to leave that little nugget there, and we'll talk about it next time because it'll.
You're not going to tell me what it is.
No, you got to.
You're just teasing me.
episode.
Oh
I am.
All right.
only because it'll be another 30 minutes of conversation if I start down that path. So let's park that there. So next episode, we'll be talking which albums did I buy?
Yes.
And then maybe you can come back with a couple more recommendations. We'll talk about the nugget of Joni Mitchell, information about what made her music so special and possibly unique to any other musician. Is there anything you want to park for the next episode?
Yes. So I think this is going to be a little bit embarrassing for me, but I would like to walk you through my equipment, how I am listening to vinyl. I'm going to, I'll probably, I don't know, I'll use my phone or something so that we can continue recording while I'm up in my lounge room. And I'm going to tell you the individual sort of components that I'm using, why I chose them. And I think you're going to be very disappointed in me. but no, I'm going to tell you, what rationale, if any, existed for why I'm listening to things the way that I am. I'd love to share with you some of the stuff that I've recently bought and why. But then also I'd love to share some new music with you, stuff that I've just, stumbled onto in the past little while. Just as we're closing this podcast out. So Lachlan, you introduced me to so many of my favorite artists of all time. If it wasn't for you, I don't think I would have ever stumbled upon Tower of Power. Mm-hmm. I probably would have eventually found Dave Matthews Band, but certainly nowhere near as early as I was able to. Just the other day, I was at a friend's house and he has a beautiful Bowers and Wilkins, or
B&W, some people nowadays.
B&W, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. He has an absolutely beautiful sound system. And he was, he sort of like, hey, do you want what's something you want to play on this? And I said, I know exactly what I'm going to play. I'm going to play On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the David Palmer extended mix by Propellerheads.
I love it.
And we sat there and we listened to that 9-minute track of the incredible sweeping left to right,
Such
and
a
then
cool
like
track.
the subsonic bass, and we almost all voided our bowels when it sort of came in with that extra octave drop towards the end.
You should have been there.
I know. Well, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting in your Mitsubishi Mirage in the car park in Mona Vale with your 10-inch Alpine sub under my feet, and you're playing this song for me for the first time. I'm like, what the is this? So, I owe a lot to you, Locke, and I thank you very much for all your amazing recommendations over the years. And I wanted to start that up again, and so I want to bring that to the podcast as well too. So you can show me some new music, I can show you some new music. Maybe listeners, if that ever happens, can also weigh in.
Share something, that'd
be fantastic.
That'd be great, and to let people in on something that has been alluded to there with my crazy Mitsubishi Mirage that I set up with the subwoofer in the front.
Do you still have it? You don't have it anymore, do you?
No, God, no, it's long gone. Long gone. But it tells it gives a bit of an insight into me, which is that I'm unorthodox. I don't tend to follow the trends. I follow what sounds best and what sometimes theory and logic says should work better. I will try and see. And so that was the idea with the Mirage, was by putting the sub in the front. The timing between the sub sound hitting you and the full range speakers hitting you was almost perfectly aligned. And unlike in most cars where you sort of feel the bass coming from the back whilst the rest of the music's coming from the front, the whole idea of that was it was bringing all the music to you from the same general direction. And so whilst I don't do that now in terms of like headphones, you can't do anything like that. And speaker setups, depending on your setup, it's more common for people to put the sub near the speakers at the front of the room, etc. But I do still tend to take an unorthodox approach to, maybe not unorthodox, I just don't follow the crowd. Just because everyone says this is good, until I hear it for myself, I do tend to be skeptical and want to get my own ears on stuff before I believe it and try it before I believe it. So that's something else I'm going to bring to this, is to go, yes, you've probably read the marketing that said this, but hey, here's a counter argument as to why maybe that's not the best approach, and something else that's a bit more left of field actually might be better. So we'll no doubt cover that in more detail as well as time goes on.
I'm excited. This is going to be great.
Me too.
If nothing else, I'm going to enjoy this.
Yeah, that's right. I think we both are, and hopefully others will as well. But if not, thanks for listening to one episode. And we'll wish you a merry journey from here.
Yes, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Groove Pod. Until next time, happy listening, and we hope you'll join us again.